Hello, parents of White Oaks first graders. Thank you for taking a few minutes to watch this little video. I am Mrs. Kravchak, the gifted resource teacher. I'm going to walk you through the process for gifted identification with the application and everything. We used to try to get everybody together, but over the years we found it more and more difficult to find good times for parents. We know how busy everyone is with a lot going on in the evenings and in the mornings and during the day. So we're going to try it this way with our technology. You'll have to let me know how it goes. I'm going to keep it short and sweet, and I'm around for anybody that needs more details. Feel free to pause if you want to and record questions. There's a survey at the end where you could write those questions down for me and I can get back to you, and all my contact information is there too. So I am here to help you through this process. The goal of this little webinar is to help you understand the process for first grade applications and identification, and I also want to help you see the value of your input in the process. We're going to look at all 5 steps of this process, including the screening. We're going to look at great detail at the application. We're also going to talk about testing and the eligibility committee meeting, along with how you would be notified in the different possible placements for your child. So the first step in the application and identification process is screening. Each first grade student enrolled in Virginia Beach was screened by an assessment specialist from the Gifted Testing Office. Our students at White Oaks were screened in October. The screening instrument used is considered to be a culture fair test. It's fair across gender, race, it's fair across ethnicity. Parents were notified of their child's score, their screening score, on December 15th. So those scores are in Parent Portal. If you don't have access to Parent Portal, you can get in touch with the front office and they can make sure that you have access to Parent Portal to see all scores. So the next step in the process is application. This is the most important step for you as the parent. The application is online, and students that score in the 90th percentile or higher, so if they scored 90%, 91, all the way up to 99, those students are automatically going to be referred for gifted testing. So you will be contacted, if you haven't already, about completing the parent portion of the application for that child. However, even if your child does not score 90th percentile or above on the screening instrument, you can still refer your child for gifted testing. Anyone with knowledge of the child's abilities can refer them for gifted testing. So you may refer, the child may refer themselves, or a teacher may also refer a child for gifted testing. The application is online for those students that are referred. A submitted application by the parent begins this process. The parents who wish to have their child considered for Old Donation School, which is our magnet school in Virginia Beach, when you open the application, you're going to need to make sure you check that box. This is the time that you check that box. Once the application is submitted, the decision to apply for Old Donation School can't be changed. So if your child is identified eligible for gifted services, we can't go back and later apply for Old Donation. We need to do it now when we submit the application the first time. So make sure when you go in, you kind of take a look at that. There's some links here on the screen. I'm going to include these links in the email that I send. The first one is the online application. And the second one is a great YouTube video that it's narrated and it can walk you through the steps you take in order to complete this application. It's important to note that students who are not referred based on screening results, or who are not referred by a teacher or by you this year, they can be referred at a later date. So we can test students, they could take the gifted test during any grade level, second grade, third grade, all the way through their school career. What's really important to think about is that testing should take place when it's most appropriate. When is it the most appropriate time for your student to be successful? The online application asks parents to reflect upon, rate, and provide specific examples of student behaviors in 4 areas related to the characteristics of gifted learners. So this screen kind of shows you the application when you get in. It's going to have those characteristics, and it'll have a rating scale for each one of those, where you're going to select almost always, often, occasionally, rarely, or never for each one of those characteristics. So when you go in to complete the application, you're first going to complete this rating scale. Think carefully about each of the areas that you rate your child. These are the areas or characteristics that you'll want to provide specific examples. So if you rate your child high in any area, try to think of an example of that. It's important to understand that the identification and placement committee, they need specific insight about your child. As the parent or guardian, it's likely that you are the person who knows your child best outside of the school setting. After all of the rating scales, you're going to be given some space to attach comments, to add additional comments. This is the area that they'll be looking for some of those specific examples. You have 5,000 characters to describe your child and offer those examples. The input that you provide on the online application is of great value, since it allows the Gifted Identification and Placement Committee to truly see your child. So really think about the rating scale, think about the areas that you rated them high, and think of any examples that you can add in this area to really let the committee see your child. So the committee and the application, it's really looking at 4 different areas. And the first area that they're going to be looking for is intense learning. Is your child an intense learner? So for example, does your child use words that you wouldn't expect to hear from a first grader? Does your child learn new things or new words quickly and apply them in different ways? Is your child interested in reading and learning new things? Does your child have a heightened sense of fairness? So those are some examples of intense learning, and those are some things that you might be able to write about. All right, so another area that we're going to be looking at is analytical thinking. So this is the second portion. Some examples of analytical thinking might be a child that sees relationships easily, a child that kind of creates metaphors, talks about how things are like other things, maybe sees cause and effect easily. Does your child see details in something? Are they very detail-oriented? Do they like puzzles? Do they like solving problems? So if you can think of any of these things, then you could describe some of those for the committee. The third area is creative thinking. So is your child a creative thinker? Does she ask a lot of questions? Is your child very curious about things? Does he want to figure things out on his own? Does your child offer different ideas and conversations, maybe tell you things that he's thinking about that sound like something a typical first grader wouldn't be considering? So looking at some of the ways that your child does things that may be unique or different. Any examples you could think of ways that they show creativity. Finally, we're looking at ways that your child is highly motivated, or how they work well with others or independently. Does your child ever show leadership when working with other children? Does your child ever go above and beyond or do more than what is expected? So this is where you would write about some of those characteristics. So when you're writing your open response, ask yourself if you're really given a good picture of your child. Since it's not realistic for the committee to come and meet every one of our wonderful White Oaks first graders, it's really important for your input to really talk about the potential and the abilities of your child outside of the school setting. So I've included 2 examples here, and you can see that clearly the first one is brief and it's limited. And in the second, the parent gives multiple examples. So we want to strive to add as many details as we can, fill up those 5,000 characters, really get in there, and it's hard for some parents, but brag about that baby. Talk about how wonderful they are and all of the things that they do and say and think. Really let the committee see who they are outside of school so they can get a full picture of that child. So just a few things to think about. Ask yourself when you're completing this application, did you paint an accurate picture? Did you give examples? If you said they had an advanced vocabulary, did you offer an example? If you rated them high for working well independently or working well with others, did you give an example of a time that they did that? Did you honestly portray the child's strengths and even possibly needs? So once your application is submitted, and that's due by March 1st at 4 p.m., once the application is submitted, the next step will be testing. Any child that has a submitted application will be tested. We use the COGAT. An assessment specialist from the Gifted Testing Office comes to White Oaks and they will test each child. The testing date will be given to you in advance. There's really not a whole lot you can do to prepare for testing. Really the best preparation would be a good night's sleep and make sure that he or she has breakfast. Information is collected from this test along with other areas like the teacher input, the parent input, other academic achievement areas, and all of this is put together to create a profile, a student profile for each child. All of this information is then taken to a committee. The Gifted Identification and Placement Committee meets. On this committee are different people. You would have different administrators, guidance counselors, teachers, gifted resource teachers, different people with experience with students and gifted. And when this committee meets, they review all of the data on the student. So they look at all of the areas. They use a multi-criteria approach. And what I mean is no one piece of information can identify a student for gifted services, and no one piece of information can prevent a child from being identified for gifted services. Based on the information presented, the parent information, the teacher information, the gifted testing scores, all of the information is reviewed, and then the committee determines if the student requires gifted services at this time. Students identified for the intellectually gifted program are students who have outstanding abilities, are capable of high performance, and who require differentiated educational programs beyond those normally provided by a regular school program. All right, so we've talked about the first 4 parts. We talked about the screening that the students took in October. We talked about the application and the importance of your input, the different areas of the application and what they're looking for. We talked about testing and that students with a submitted application will be tested here at White Oaks. We talked about identification and the committee that meets and kind of how they look at multiple aspects. The final part that is going to be the notification. It's going to be you getting an email. The email that you put into the application system is going to be the email that they use to contact you. When you get that email, one of 3 things is going to happen. 1, the student is not identified eligible for gifted services at this time. 2, the student will be identified as requiring gifted services. If the child is identified, he or she will either be accepted to Old Donation School or the child will receive gifted services here at White Oaks through our resource cluster model. So they'll be placed in a cluster class. I work with the teacher and the students to make sure that what they do is at a more rigorous, more highly a higher expectation for our gifted students and really differentiated and meet their needs. Or 3, the child will be placed on hold. So if a student is placed on hold, additional data is collected in 2nd grade and the child is tested again. So that's one of the 3 things will happen after testing. I want you to know that I am here to help. I am happy to sit together and talk about the application. I can be very good at asking questions to get you thinking about what you can write in the application. We have computers here at school, so if you need a computer in order to work on the application, we have stuff here at school for you to use. I can also be available by phone if you just need a phone call. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help you with this application. The assessment specialists in the gifted testing office are also available to answer any questions you may have. So you can reach one of the testing specialists by giving them a phone call. So that is it. Thank you for listening to me talk. I hope I answered more questions than I created. Please complete this survey for me. You'll find a link to this survey in the email. There's a portion for you to write comments. There's a portion for you to ask questions. You can put your questions in there, or you can directly send me questions via email, or you could give me a phone call. Again, thank you, and I hope to hear from you, and I look forward to continuing our work together.